Hello and welcome to this video on the Scottish Government's new Transport Bill. I'm Alex and I'm a member of 2050 Climate Group's Policy Subgroup. For those of you who aren't familiar with the 2050 Climate Group, we are a group of young professionals across Scotland aiming to educate, encourage and inspire action on climate change. We do this in various ways, including our Young Leaders Development Programme. You can find out more about our work on our website at 2050.scot. 2050 is currently collecting young people's views on the new Transport Bill so that we can respond to the Scottish Parliament's consultation and ensure that our views on transport issues are heard. The aim of this video is to help you quickly understand the Transport Bill so that you can more easily respond to our survey. I'll give an overview of the bill's content and what it's trying to achieve. I'll also give some context to transport issues in Scotland and how climate change and young people might be impacted by the Transport Bill. So, first off, why should you care about the Transport Bill? It might sound boring, but it's really important. After all, we all use transport every day, whether that's walking, cycling, public transport or driving. We need good transport links so we can access work, education and leisure opportunities. Tackling issues like congestion, air pollution and road safety are all really important to ensure that everyone can travel sustainably and safely wherever they live. Secondly, transport is the biggest source of carbon emissions in Scotland, a whopping 37%. Emissions from transport have barely fallen since 1990, and we need to see real action to make sure that transport doesn't hold back Scotland's action on climate change. Thirdly, the decisions taken in the Transport Bill could impact the long-term future of transport and influence how people travel. This bill will affect us for years to come, so it's really important to get our views as young people heard and ensure that the Scottish Government gets this right. If you're interested in learning more about how a bill proceeds through Parliament and the consultation process, have a look here. Now, clearly there's lots of stuff in the Transport Bill, so we're going to focus on what we think are the three most important aspects of the bill for young people and climate change. These are low emission zones, bus services and smart ticketing. Don't worry if you don't know much about any of these, as the rest of this video will explain them. If you want to find out about the other sections of the Transport Bill, you can visit the Transport Scotland website, which provides a breakdown of the proposals for parking, roadworks and Scotland's canal network. Low emission zones, as the name suggests, aim to limit air pollution in defined areas, usually cities or large towns. These zones are a very common method used to reduce air pollution, especially in Europe, where over 200 cities in 15 countries have them, including London, Paris and Berlin. Councils or governments typically set the rules and regulations for low emission zones, and the most important way that these zones set out to improve air quality is by restricting the types of vehicles which are allowed to enter them. The most highly polluting vehicles either have to pay a hefty fee or are prohibited outright. This is commonly monitored and enforced through the use of cameras, similar to speeding. Scotland doesn't currently have any low emission zones, but in late 2017 the government announced the introduction of low emission zones in Glasgow, Edinburgh, Dundee and Aberdeen by the end of 2020. Glasgow will be the first city to have a low emission zone, with the rules coming into force by the end of 2018. Despite this welcome progress, there have been some concerns about the effectiveness of the proposed zones in Glasgow. This is because Glasgow City Council proposals will exclude the most polluting buses from the zone, which covers part of the city centre, from the end of 2018, with less polluting buses, as well as cars and vans, being required to comply by 2022. The decision to focus solely on buses at first, and not to require cars or vans to take action for another 4 years, received criticism from groups, as this may have knock-on impacts for how people access the city centre. There are also concerns regarding the level of funding currently available from the Scottish Government for bus operators to improve their fleet. The Transport Bill enables local authorities, that is councils, to implement low emission zones, subject to approval by the Scottish Government. The Government would then be able to set specific penalty charges for different types of vehicles. The bill will also facilitate the setting of specified emission standards and timescales for introducing low emission zones. But crucially, no specific dates or emission levels are given in the bill itself. The Transport Bill also sets out requirements for councils to use the money raised from these zone penalties for projects which further facilitate the achievement of lower levels of air pollution. So as an example, the money raised from penalty fees could then be spent on more bike lanes, better public transport, or pedestrianisation projects. The low emission zone proposals in the Transport Bill could have several impacts on young people, most of which are positive. First of all, most young people in Scotland live in the 4 cities where low emission zones will be introduced. Lower levels of air pollution would obviously be of huge benefit to the health and well-being of young people, as children are particularly at risk to the ill effects of air pollution. Young people are also disproportionately depending on walking, cycling and buses to get around, compared to driving a car. So if local authorities use low emission zones as an opportunity to reduce the use of cars in urban areas, then this could benefit young people by making it faster and easier to get into the city centres. Low emission zones might also impact climate change, as they have a huge potential to not only cut air pollution, but also carbon emissions in city centres. They would do this by encouraging people to travel by public transport, bike or on foot instead of driving. However, the proposals for Glasgow's low emission zone do not really encourage people to travel by public transport, bike or on foot in the short term, as no action is being taken on cars for another 4 years. It is important to note, however, that the low emission zone proposals in the Transport Bill are separate to those proposals being put forward by Glasgow City Council. Buses are the main mode of public transport in Scotland, and are a really important means of getting around for many people, especially the young and the old. As well as this, buses help to cut congestion, carbon emissions and air pollution by reducing the number of journeys that are made by car. However, bus passenger numbers have seen a big decline by around 14% since 2001. Bus operators highlight traffic congestion as the primary cause of delays and unreliability of bus journeys, whilst other people have claimed the rising costs of putting people off. There have been debates in Scottish Parliament recently about the need for publicly owned bus operations. The only major bus operation currently under partial public ownership is Lothian Buses in Edinburgh, which many of you might be familiar with. There is a wide agreement across the political parties that action needs to be taken to reverse the decline in bus use and get more people using public transport. The Transport Bill sets out steps to allow local authorities to play a greater role in operating local bus services. This could include 1. Part ownership, as is the case in Edinburgh with Lothian Buses. 2. Franchising, where a council would tender a contract for bus companies to operate. Or 3. Public ownership, in areas which currently don't have an operating service as they aren't deemed profitable or have low demand. As well as ownership of bus services, the Transport Bill sets up plans to require bus operators to improve information on services, routes, timetables and fares. This is an important part of making sure that using buses is easy and clear for people. Whilst allowing councils to play a larger role in bus services is arguably a good thing, which might improve the standard of bus services in some areas, some would say that ownership is not the biggest problem. Some people might say that congestion, which is predominantly caused by private cars, is the biggest problem facing buses, as it frequently causes delays and consequently puts people off using the bus. There is some concern that the Transport Bill will do little to cut congestion or improve the reliability of bus services across the country. Young people, as well as people in retirement age group, are disproportionately dependent on buses compared to other age groups. So, having a reliable, frequent and fast bus service is important for ensuring that young people continue to have access to jobs, services and leisure opportunities, regardless of where they live. Young people are also typically on a much lower income compared to people in higher age groups, so having an affordable bus service is important too. In terms of the impact on climate change, buses are a very effective means of cutting carbon emissions from Scotland's transport sector. Buses are much more carbon efficient than private cars, as they can carry tens of people at once, as opposed to 4 or 5. This also means they are a very efficient way of getting people around, causing less congestion, which also leads to fewer carbon emissions. Finally, buses are a very important way of reducing air pollution in urban areas, as they reduce the number of cars on the road. Finally, I'm going to talk about smart ticketing. This usually refers to an electronic method of paying for public transport tickets. This typically is in the form of a card, such as the Oyster card in London. The benefits of smart ticketing systems include better journey integration between different modes of transport, better price options, and more convenience for the individual. Scotland currently has no national smart ticketing scheme, although some regional smart card systems do exist, such as on Lothian buses and Edinburgh trams. The Scottish Government aims for the Transport Bill to strengthen smart ticketing technology across different operators and different modes of transport, thereby making it more convenient for people to use public transport. The bill will enable the government to extend ticketing schemes to include connecting services, set a national technological standard for smart ticketing, provide a guide for smart ticketing arrangements and schemes, and direct a local transport authority to make or vary a ticketing scheme. This stops short of the government establishing a national smart ticketing scheme covering all public transport, as is currently being proposed in Germany as an example. These steps will probably help make public transport more integrated and more convenient to use, but arguably don't go far enough in making public transport as convenient and easy to use as is possible. As already mentioned, young people are disproportionately dependent on public transport compared to middle-aged people. Making public transport more streamlined and more accessible would therefore benefit young people across Scotland, as well as making it more convenient for people of all ages to use public transport. Therefore, smart ticketing has the potential to reduce carbon emissions. However, the increase in digital technologies, like smart ticketing, could actually increase carbon emissions, as the IT infrastructure needed to make these services work use a large amount of energy. On the other hand, this could be balanced out by a reduction in car usage. In conclusion, the Transport Bill is a really important opportunity to tackle issues facing transport in Scotland today. There's some really welcome steps set out to improve air quality, bus services and smart ticketing, although arguably there are some missed opportunities to get more people travelling sustainably. There are important actions in the bill which will have an impact on young people and climate change, so it's really important that we make our voices heard. Now that you've watched this video, you're ready to respond to our survey on the Transport Bill and tell us what you think about the issues we've talked about. You can find the link to the survey here, and more information about the Transport Bill on the Transport Scotland website here. We'd really appreciate you taking just a few minutes to fill out our survey, so that together we can make our voice heard in the Scottish Parliament and make the Transport Bill as strong as possible.